hey, everybody, learn from our mistakes. Energy working tips that we have learned the hard way. You all know me, but I'll have guests introduce themselves, give a little bit of their background.
Okay. My name's Chris Miller. I'm a counselor inside the house, but I've been doing this a lot longer. I think this is 30 years this year. So, how best to, I've done pagan, I've done druidic, I've done a whole bunch of ceremonial, I've done a bunch of different stuff. And at the end of the day, I just want to pass some of that on, so that's why I'm here.
It was introduced to me initially as the Wizard of Brunswick.
Yeah, that's a thing.
I'm Michelle Belanger. I write a bunch of books about everything from energy work to fallen angels, living among humanity. That part's fiction. I've been teaching this stuff, 20 years, easy at this point.
Yeah.
We used to be on a podcast, and actually this very topic was one of the podcast topics, so we'll see how much we end up. A lot of the stuff I learned to tell people to not do, I learned by doing it first. So that's sort of where this idea for a class came from.
And I'm Sarah. Most of you who come to Mew often know who I am. I'm a counselor in the house, and unlike my more scholarly companions up here, as they say in the movie Moana, I am self-taught. So I have made a lot of mistakes in my journey learning how to be a mostly competent energy worker. So this is definitely going to be a lot of feel free to do open Q&A during class. It's not going to be very formal.
Yeah, we tend to do discussion best, I think.
Yeah.
So, you want to just jump in?
What's the dumbest thing we ever did? Just start with that.
I think there are two things that I used to see people start with. It was trying to play with traffic lights or the weather.
Oh God, the weather.
Because if you go big or go home, right? So you figure out that you can do some shit, and then the next thing you want to do is play with the wind, or see if you can make the storms happen, or that kind of thing. And you don't really understand the threads you're pulling there, and you don't really pay attention. And then when things get weird for a little while, it couldn't possibly be. And I think we do that because of the movies we see and the comic books and the, you fantastic, amazing powers, but that you've got to kind of build to it. And I don't think we realize that very often. It's fun, and it's nice to have that rush, but I don't think anybody was ready for how badly you can strip your gears doing that.
Well, in watching a lot of people go through that phase of like trying to push really, really big things to see some sort of demonstrable effect in the outside world, part of that phase seems to be the learning to accept that it is actually real and therefore has consequences.
Yeah.
Younger magical workers, energy workers, on some level there is a lot of doubt of whether or not this is real. And so I know in my case it was like, I'll push to do this really big thing to see if it's actually going to have an impact. And that impact has to be big enough to prove to me that it's really, really me doing it, like an increasing levels of bombastic magic.
Anybody seen the movie Unbreakable? I'm always reminded of the weightlifting scene in there, where he sits down, it's like, all right, I'm going to do this. All right, now I'm going to do 300. Now I'm going to do 500. Now I'm going to, and that's I think especially when you're starting out, that's what you do. And you do it until something, I think it's fair to say, something smacks you back.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when they smack hard. And I think going with this, there's a certain level, I don't know if anybody else has ever been through this, but the certain level of weird paranoia that comes with the beginnings of things. Whether it's, Michelle and I came up together in Hinkley and Brunswick, and there were the witch wars.
Oh God.
And there were the covens that were doing things.
And usually that's sort of been like it's one person sees somebody else. Okay, actually, so I was the part of a massive war apparently going on at our goth club. The fun part about this was that there were a whole bunch of like little junior woodchuck fluff witches and like little vampire wannabes. And there was one guy who we had nicknamed Cro-Magnon. He was about 6'8" and he always dressed as the crow. But apparently he was a vampire lord. Years later I find out about this because he was waging a grand war against the other vampire lord at the goth club, which apparently was me.
Congratulations.
But so I'm hearing like all of these like psychic battles and astral stuff that's going on the dance floor, and apparently I'm the opposing army, and I'm like, I have noticed none of this. But okay.
Yeah.
So that's my experience of witch wars, of like somebody has kind of created a big, but one of the reasons he built it up
Yeah.
was largely he was getting a lot of girls to sleep with him, who might otherwise not sleep with him because he needed to protect them with sex magic.
Like you do.
And the thing was, that was a thing that happened like with ridiculous frequency.
Yeah, there was a weird period between like 85 and 92.
Yeah.
Down in our area, where you had little cult leaders popping up all over the place. And there were a few of us who were responsible human beings who, wanted to make sure that people were doing safe things and all of that. But the idea of this witch war, they would build these grand stories just to prove to other people how special they were. And I think it's worth noting that as you begin to practice this stuff, it's easy to get wrapped up in your own story. I think it's interesting because there's two parallel things or two paradoxical things that you have to believe, I think, to do magic or energy work. One is, it's all about you. They always tell you, you create the center, you create the boundary, you're the center of the universe, blah, blah, blah. That's great, except for the second thing, which is, it's not all about you. It's a big world and a big cosmos, and there are boundaries and there are things. And so you have to live in that liminal place, right in the middle, and it's really hard to dial that in. So you're either all ego, thinking that there's a witch war and people are attacking me, and there's this defense stuff and the little astral nasties that kind of float around. It's like, okay, yeah, that's like background noise. Or there's the other side where it's not about you, and you feel,
I don't know, beholden to such a standard of not doing harm that you never do magic at all.
Right. The really, really abstract stuff where you're not sure that it is ethically correct for you to change a thing, because who the hell are you to do that?
Yeah.
And finding that place in the middle, I think it takes a long, long time.
Yeah, so on one hand, you kind of have to experiment, and on the other hand, experimenting means that there are going to be train wrecks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Massive consequences.
It's fascinating to watch people do science to this.
The stupidest thing that I have ever done is and I missed the witch wars, unfortunately, because I was 10 or younger.
Some of you might not have been conceived yet, but that's okay.
That is a disappointment for me now, that I know that was going on and it was so intense.
You'd have had a good time.
Yeah, the 50-person vampire coven in Shaker Heights, and anyway.
The stupidest thing that I have ever done, and it was when I was in high school, and I had someone who really wanted to date me. I did not want to date him. And being what I am as a Caprian counselor, you tend to attract people. You're shiny, you're interesting. People just automatically want to connect to you because that's your type of energy. And I kept telling him no politely, telling him no politely, telling him no politely, and I said, fine, I'm going to push this guy because I know that I can, because I don't want him to be around me anymore. He tried to burn my parents' house down.
Yeah.
Because I politely, verbally told him no, but energetically did not politely tell him no. And that had some consequences to do something that big.
One of the things I like to reiterate that always gets me in trouble with these two is children shouldn't play with dead things.
What?
I know, right?
Dead things play with
Right,
most
dead things play with you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they started it.
but I don't think I've ever told them the story of why I hold to that. I was in college, and I knew a thing or two, and there was a woman that I was seeing who had had a miscarriage earlier in her life, and she wanted to talk to the baby. And because I was in love, I helped set this up. And it was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had, and I passed out in the middle of it. And when I came to, she was fundamentally broken. She needed to go in for psychiatric help. I do not know what happened between the moment I passed out and I came to that affected her so. But that's my responsibility. That's my fault. And that's one of the reasons that I don't do that kind of work, is because some people aren't ready for it. I wasn't ready for it. I could do it, but just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing.
Yeah, just because the door's there doesn't
Right,
mean, if
exactly.
you don't know how to close the door or control the opening or closing
Yeah.
of the door, then you probably shouldn't
Exactly.
try. But unfortunately, most of us don't figure that out until we've at least bowled our way through a door once.
Yes.
Right.
That's
I mean,
correct.
you don't know what the mistake feels like until the mistake is already in the past, and then it's just, now you have to live with the consequences of your actions.
I've got a lot of different stories, but going off of that one, the one that probably taught me the most, and it's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I had a great uncle, Big Uncle Bill, and he had some sort of like a big bad heart attack. My grandmother was well aware of my abilities, and in several instances with her brothers, cancer, heart attacks, whatever, I believe the quote was, "God doesn't answer my prayers, but I know something does for you. So could you make this happen?" And in Big Uncle Bill's case, it was she wanted me to help him live. And you would think that doing work to help someone survive, that's healing, that's positive, that's good. But this particular experience taught me definitely that death sometimes is a necessary and a good thing, and to force your way through it, to push someone past the ability. Anyway, so I kept doing work to keep him alive. So he had a massive heart attack. They gave him a triple bypass. I suppose I should preface this with the fact that he was a hoarder and lived in a farm in Ashtabula where he literally had a hammer hanging from a rope next to his bed to hit the rats on the head when they got in bed with him, like you do. So like he was living in squalor, which might explain why when they did the triple bypass, something went wrong and he ended up with an E. coli infection in the lining of his heart. Like there was green pussy stuff, so he's in a coma for weeks, and Graham is just like, no, make him live. So I kept pushing to keep him going, and he hit to the point where he was just internally hemorrhaging. He stayed around for a couple of years after that, but there was just something kind of dead in his eyes. He wanted to be gone. He had this sense that he should have been gone, and his life quality was never the same. He was up, he was walking around, but he was kind of a ghost. Not to say that the soul wasn't still there. He was there. He was just profoundly confused and sort of at loose ends as to, it was like the world didn't have a place for him anymore. And he had some sense of it. And the kind of things that he kept surviving against all odds, and the amount of effort that it continued to take to keep him going, it just hit a point where I was like, you know what? Actually, I think the thing that I should do, and this was where I think I was first really palpably aware of this thing the universe does. I don't know if you want to call it God, the natural order, or whatever you want to call it. When you do magic, when you put intention, will, energy, whatever word you want to call it, when you're pushing out into the world, there are certain paths where it feels right and it clicks into a thing and it just goes where it needs to go. And you do it often enough and you can feel where, yeah, this is an easy thing. I'm actually contributing to the way things need to be. And then there are workings where you feel something kind of push your hand back and go, mm-mm. And you can push past that. You absolutely can. If you've got enough will and you've got enough ego to just be like, fuck it, I'm making this happen, you can push past it. The results of pushing past it are never good. universe is like, no, really, like there are dominoes you are not even aware of that you are now knocking down. You are bull china shopping your way through this, and it's just going to be, and the repercussions over time are cascade in a very significant way.
The creepy thing about that I've experienced that is that they keep coming back. They keep echoing back. You can always trace something back to that moment where you pushed it beyond.
Oh yeah, 10 years, 20 years,
Yeah.
like there are, and to a level that you never really quite realize. And sometimes you'll run into somebody like 30 years later who they weren't even part of the picture, and they'll be like, you know what, this blah 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 thing, this weird thing happened to me on this day and this time, and you realize that you just knocked down a whole bunch of stuff that really you should have thought twice about, and you did get that little subtle warning.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, on the children shouldn't play with dead things front. Anybody else in here work in any kind of capacity as a medium? Okay. When I was young, and this is an ability that I've had since before I had memory. My mother talked about me speaking in Italian to my great-grandmother as a little toddler. And because everyone that I worked with, my family, all my ancestors put a little protective bubble around me for a very long time, I thought everybody was friendly. And I would bring things home with me that were friendly. And then they weren't friendly. And it was a very big learning curve to learn how to protect myself from having things jump in and talk through me. And have my mother remember instances where she was like, I know it wasn't you. And I didn't know what to do. And she would call a friend of hers who also did tarot readings and medium work and be like, fix my child, something's wrong with my child. And that was a big trial and error to learn those skills of how not to be open to that all the time and how not to invite bad things in, to see through the veneer that something will put over itself. Because it's the same as people. It's the same as dealing with a flesh and blood human being. People that have passed on will lie to you, they will cajole you, and it took me a long time to learn that.
Yeah, they don't even have to be demons,
Yeah.
they're just people.
Yep, it can just be a dick, I mean, that's...
Yeah.
I think there are some passive side effects of when you begin to work with this, this stuff, which one of the ones that baffled me for a long time was, I think I'll just call it charisma. You begin to build a charisma where one person could, like anybody else could say a thing to someone and they wouldn't get as emotionally upset or whatever. But when you begin to work with the energies that are you, and if you work with things outside of you, you begin to build a charisma where suddenly the words that you start speaking have much more impact. They seem to cut through things. And you can cause a lot of damage with that very, very quickly. And I think that until you learn that you're focusing your will that way, it can be hard not to hurt people around you. It's like, you know, the old Bullwinkle thing, I don't know my own strength. The words do have power, and if you work with chance and you begin to focus that energy, and that's one of the ways you focus it, be prepared to, if you yell at someone, for them to break down, or if you speak sharply to someone, for them to take it very personally, because you're cutting through some things.
Well, yeah, because doesn't working with, you know, any sort of energy work or magic, you just naturally develop more of a affinity for charging your words with your intent, which is why if you get angry and then naturally go overboard, what, you know, was you getting angry, you know, a couple of years ago before doing anything, and now it just means so much more.
Well, you almost end up having to be your own thought police, because if you have honed your will to bring your thoughts into reality, you shouldn't have casually angry thoughts to do horrible things to people. Because every once in a while you'll be like, whoa, 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 that was actually, I just accidentally did magic I've ever,
accidental magic is the worst. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And I think that has a chilling effect. When I was first in the pagan community, we were having a meeting and somebody was like, I don't want so-and-so to come, blah, 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 blah. And they fell and hurt their back. And I remember sitting in the seat going, never gonna piss off Judith. Just saying. Ever. That was 1990, never. Because she didn't mean to hurt that person, but she had a skill that did it, and the chilling effect it had on the people who saw her do it.
Well, yeah, people will never look at you the same if somebody, even if you are not actually the person who's done this, but you have honed your magical will, and then you like kind of wish harm on someone, and they die. Even if it wasn't you, because we won't get into whether or not that's necessarily a possible thing, but if there are people around you who are like, so maybe, and actually you end up going, okay, well, was that me? Could that be me? I know, like my grandmother saw stuff, had precognizance, and I know that one of the biggest quandaries for her with that was she could never quite parse the line of, was she bringing about the disasters that she foresaw, or was she seeing stuff that was going to happen? Like, what was her part or her role in that? And parsing that line of responsibility also, which certainly like left an impact on me on trying to figure out, like, I don't see things quite in the same way that, not with the regularity that she would, but there were a few instances of like, was that me doing it? Or was that me responding to it, like picking up that this was a thing that was going to happen?
Like the debate between, are you the harbinger or the creator?
Yeah, and you know, are you the harbinger through which the energy then pulses to cause the thing to happen? And that's all of the above is true is often an answer in most magical workings for me.
But what I was going to say to you is, like, even if you do something accidentally, like what you said with Judith, if Judith were to realize that she had unintentionally, done this thing, wasn't intentional, but it happened, wouldn't you say then it's the responsibility of the energy worker to say that, oh, if that is something that I cannot control, I must then do my best of my ability to work on controlling that and honing that so that that sort of mistake doesn't happen again? Because you might not be able to be blamed for the initial event, but if you don't take every precaution to prevent it from happening again, then you can be blamed.
I'm going to hazard that the end result of all the cautionary tales is going to be that the first thing is boundaries.
Yes.
Like boundaries for yourself, boundaries for your space, boundaries, like learning what boundaries are. Like you are making the mistakes in the first place in finding those boundaries. Like you kind of have to face plant into them. We're all stumbling in the dark at first.
And then I think, there's those boundaries, and there's the boundaries that you set up on purpose, so to contain yourself.
Well, yeah, you learn where the boundaries should be,
Exactly,
and you
exactly.
kind of start constructing I shouldn't do that only, like I game a lot, and like some of the like bigger, like I'm just going to like make everything go my way, and a lot of like the people controlling stuff that I do, I just leave it, like it's allowable within the virtual reality of games, so that it doesn't have an outlet anywhere else. Like some of those abilities, like if you find that you have abilities like that, you kind of want to give them some sort of an outlet. Anything that is damaging to people, but you create like little places where it's going to do the least harm.
As similar to intentionally feeding off of a willing donor instead of allowing your brand to go feral and just attack people randomly.
Yeah.
Same concept, aiming where you want it to get
And
what it needs.
learning how you have to construct your particular boundaries is definitely a big learning experience. You are much better at will work than I am.
Oh yeah.
Much better. I can't say I'm going to have a boundary here because I say it's so. I have to make myself tools to create boundaries around myself. I use glamour camouflage to create boundaries around myself and to make sure that I'm interacting with people in a way that is safe and that is mutually beneficial. And it took me a while to learn that not everyone could say, because I'm saying it's so, it's so. It just, I could never get it to work, and I thought I was really bad at energy work, and I'm not. But I had to learn how to do it a different way.
I remember early on, you and I did some work because I'm invisible, or at least I was for a long time, completely invisible. And it was just, that was my way of protecting myself and other people. If no one noticed, then it was fine. And that's great if you can control it. Later, you have to learn to overcome that particular boundary. I had to learn to overcome that particular boundary because I had work that I wanted to accomplish that required me to be a little more visible.
That reminds me of another, my car is a baked potato. Okay, so guy I dated in college, had this baked potato spell. Like literally, he would speed and he would project around his truck, my car is a baked potato, like tinfoil and steam and everything. Like pretty much with the whole, like any cop that would see it would just be like, that, and be so confused that they wouldn't actually like bother to go after the car. And he had that level of ridiculousness to his magic. I mean, he was kind of like if you've ever watched, I think Sorcerer Hunters is the anime. He's Carrot from Sorcerer Hunters. He's a walking anime character. I just couldn't bring myself to be running around a baked potato. So I just made the car invisible, which was a really bad idea. So I'm driving and I'm speeding a little bit, but after the third semi, tried to be in the exact same space as my car and just did not seem to see me. I was like, oh, I've decided to just like make it invisible to everyone. And that's just dumb.
Yep. The law of unintended consequences.
Yes, and so like actually thinking it through, like if you're going to put like that much intention on something, like these things do often work. But if your car is running around, you're invisible, and you're trying to be invisible to the cops, don't be surprised if somebody rear ends you and is completely astounded that your car has suddenly appeared in front of them.
So we've been John a little while. Questions, thoughts?
I was gonna say, something that you guys have seemed to come back to a number of times, at least the way I see it, and which also strikes a chord with me in early working with Energy Work Magic, whatever particular brand you want to call it. So I've tried different things earlier on. Is that we're all sort of subject to the same initial mistakes that every field of science makes, which is we get so obsessed with can we do it that we don't ask should we do it.
Yes.
And most often we are so impulsive and we just want to do the thing. We want to give that proof. The bigger the thing, the bigger the proof, the more we can believe it's real, and we feel it'll reinforce our will to be able to do more and whatnot. And then we don't go, oh, maybe I shouldn't make my car invisible because I'll get T-boned.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And a lot of it is just impulsivity.
Well, and it's funny because some people, I've had conversations over the years, some people view that as amorality. It's really more like you're a magical toddler. You don't know that you're going to burn, you don't know that the stove is hot until you put your hand on the stove. That's not amorality in that you're trying to hurt yourself or you accidentally start a fire. That's a kid.
It's like magical
Trying
id.
things. Right, you're a kid, and it's okay, and that's why I wish we had, this is, again, I'm going back many, many years now, I wish there were stronger communities at that time to guide people. Pre the house, people were popping up, there were some good books, there were some people doing some good work, but it was all books, and so people would just go out and fuck around.
Well, and some of the problem with that was there was a culture of secrecy around almost all of it.
Yeah.
And so where we're at now, what I found to be most incredibly useful is having other people who at least have dabbled and stuck their toes in the water to talk about what they're doing, to bounce ideas off of one another. But if you are solitary, which by necessity almost all of us were in the 70s and 80s and thereon, you have no one to talk to go, hey, did this really work? Hey, is this a good idea? Hey, have you tried this thing before?
It was amazing when we were all able to kind of start comparing notes. We all, the conceit was none of us here are insane.
Yeah.
Or we're all crazy together. That's okay too, as long as no one's getting hurt. But once you get that conceit done, you can get work done. And you can begin to compare, and you can then you begin to construct what's actually happening. And that's really useful, multiple perspectives.
Yes.
But it was such a huge breakthrough when that started to happen.
Well, I've started working with a 13-year-old, closely talking about like what she's seeing and how she's experiencing the world. It's made me realize I started to seriously practice magic and like really do stuff when I was 10. And that sounds like, you're looking back at it like ridiculously early, and then looking at this 13-year-old, like, nope, not too early at all. But at that time, I just automatically presumed that nobody else experienced these things. Nobody else was going to be willing to talk about them. And so the only answer I had to get any kind of like confirmation from the world was to experiment on all of my peers without telling them what I was doing. Like, convincing them to do seances. So I've got a knack for not just will work, but to make people do what I want them to do. And in first grade, I got into a lot of trouble because I wanted to see, this was a fully conscious thing. Like, I wanted to see if I could convince the entire class to let me stab them. So I don't know, we
Let's
had...
talk about immorality.
No, but at that age, I'm like, what, 6 or 7 in first grade, and the teacher, we had a substitute. I don't know how long this substitute left the room. It was literally long enough for me to convince the entire class to line up in a row. I had created a little hypodermic out of a thumbtack and cardboard paper, and I was going to immunize them against ghosts. I knew I was lying to them. I knew that I just wanted to see if they would do something because they believed it was a thing that they needed to do. And I'd gotten halfway down the line. The kids I didn't like, I sent to the line, told them it didn't, I sent them to the end, told them it didn't take, and they'd have to do it again. And they, like little ducklings, just all obeyed. And so there were some parent-teacher conferences thereafter. But like at that age, like what parent would even be prepared to go, honey, we shouldn't try to mind control the entire class, because under what circumstances is that even a thing that you discuss with your kid? But learning like just stupid stuff that you did, and I'm like, okay, so that's these days. If I had done that, like there would be like I'd be in jail.
Yeah.
Like, just straight up.
Dosed up on.
Dosed up, whatever. I'm really lucky. Like they were just like, well, she spent a lot of time in the hospital, so maybe that's why this happened. I'm like, no, I really just wanted to see if I could make them do things. And nobody told me that that was bad. I learned that it was bad by watching the repercussions on the people I was making do things. So again, boundaries. Like.
Well, I know next month is ethics.
Yes,
So-
then you don't have to do it to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't do what I did. Is really the answer.
I would say the worst thing that I see that most people have happen is that they get wiped out. Whatever it is that they've decided to do, and that can be heal people, that can be push things, that can be whatever, is then they are exhausted and they don't get out of bed for 3 days.
Yeah.
Or they're sick. And I believe con crud happens. You got a lot of people, there's germs passed. I also believe that a lot of the con crud comes from people overextending themselves.
Well, there's that classic rookie healer mistake, which is sort of like why Reiki exists for a lot of people. Reiki is you're drawing on an energy outside of yourself, but an awful lot of people when they first start healing, first of all, they feel that they must heal everyone. They must fix everything. And when they're trying to do work on someone, they will take out of themselves to make the other person better. Or they'll do the other thing where it's
Yes.
like,
Right.
I will take their illness.
Guilty.
And yeah, I'll just make that part of me because obviously to heal it, I must also suffer. No, you take that, you put that stuff somewhere else and not in you and not in somebody else. Like ground that shit out. But like overextending yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to strip your gears. And we do go through this every year with Gather, where you warn people, you may want to take a day off afterwards. You may want to slow down a little bit. I mean, go do your work, but take care of yourself. And I think it's very, very easy to do the work, deny the repercussions to yourself, and then do more work and deny the repercussions until you dig a hole so deep that you have no choice but to drop.
And knowing when to ask for help is a big skill, because nobody likes to ask for help. We have a society, even just regular society, not like magic society, but regular, where you're not supposed to ask for help. You're supposed to be able to do everything yourself. to be a competent adult.
Right.
And that's not true. That's never true. That's a really stupid idea. So when you're starting to work in something and you're getting in over your head and you're just learning, no one is going to judge you for being like, hey, I could use a hand because I'm getting wiped out, or oh my gosh, I have started doing this process and I have so much built up energy that I can't get rid of, and I don't know what to do with this, and it's making me bonkers. You don't have to deal with that on your own, and having a group of trusted individuals is very, very helpful. That's one of the benefits of being in the house, is I have a lexicon of people that I can call up and say, hey, I tried to do this thing and I was really, really bad at it. Can you help me out? Because I don't have all the skills that every other house member has.
Yeah, but even if you're not in the house, I mean, you've got a community of people you can talk to. You should all build a community around yourself. I mean, the house is one thing,
Yeah.
but there's so many others.
Yes. Well, it always helps to have multiple points of view.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's some things where it's like, if I had gone my entire life assuming that everybody's level of awareness or ability to tolerate certain like types of energy or states of energy, that everybody was exactly like mine, that doesn't end well. I like breaking your friend, there were plenty of people where I'm like, this is perfectly normal, let's go into this house where there's all these dead things talking to people, and like nothing's bothering me, but there's somebody who's now in the fetal position in the corner, and I'm like, well why? This is easy stuff, right? Individual results vary.
No, why are you crying? That thing's friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Bob, he's fine. Oh yeah, he looks like a Balrog, but really he's a sweet Balrog.
I think there's also the empowering of people. I mean, I'm lucky to have been, I have a husband who's been through this with me, but he will, when I'm in a bad space, I don't know I'm in a bad space. So I said to him one time, I just don't feel like going to this party, I don't want to talk to anybody, I just want to be home. And I thought that was a perfectly normal thing to say. And he looked at me and said, whose feelings are those?
I was gonna say, you're an extrovert, so having an introvert moment, like an introvert, that's like par for the course. Do I wanna leave the house today? Do I have to talk to people? Jane, not wanting to talk to people?
Yeah, I just want to be home. I don't want to go anywhere. I need to be home. I just need to be home. He's like, I know whose feelings they are. Sarah's on the interstate with a tire and a storm, and I'm like, oh, you're taking my energy to help you just get home.
Yes.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I was in the process of changing a tire on the side of the road in like typhoon winds, and I didn't have time to text you to be like, hey, heads up. I'm gonna need this. I had full intentions of telling you when I got home safe.
Well, as much as we have managed to start to build communities and stuff, but culturally we still don't have the structure to create the number of safety nets we need for like intense initiatory experience. I think a lot of us tend to really underestimate the emotional and psychological impact and toll of initiatory experience of any sort. I mean, if you've done any research into like shamanism, a number of like Oriental, Asian traditions, like when you are going through these processes of spiritual awakening, the different levels of like opening your inner consciousness to different realms, in idealized, romanticized locations and times of the past, people could just sit in a monastery on a mountain and deal with that. And you have to get up and go to work on Monday after going through this really intense thing, and somehow find some way to people after that.
And much of society places no value on this.
Yeah.
And so there is no excuse.
And at the
that's
same time,
hard.
you're chewing through all the emotional impact of it, like the levels of just reassessing how you look at the world. I think we vastly underestimate how brain-breaking it is to have one of those aha moments that makes you have to like rearrange all the pieces of your Weltanschauung, your worldview, and go, no, it's actually, I thought the world looked like this, and now I have to like, it's actually kind of tilted on, I'm not even sure what its shape is. Holy crap, what do I do? And the deeper we go into that, the more we end up, I end up equating it to almost like gauging a piercing. Like you push to a certain point, like almost to the point where your brain can't quite handle it. And you don't really want to push past that because you're going to hurt yourself. Like step back from the work at that point and like really allow yourself to plateau and process and give it some thought. Don't just do. Integrate it.
One of the things that Sarah and I have talked about a lot is what is the place of your spiritual life when you go to work? How do you integrate? And that's a topic in and of itself. I'm not gonna, but I think we talk about the mistakes that we make. It's very easy to take your magic to work with you, and that may not be the greatest thing. Whether it's manipulating people or just being the wacko in the cube on the corner. You're there to do a particular thing, and sometimes camouflage is a little bit better than standing out. I don't know, the place where I work likes to talk about bringing your whole self to work. But I don't think they really understand what that means.
There's a reason why I don't have a regular job.
I think it's safe to say they don't like the whole self.
No. They want
their self.
Yeah.
The hell?
So
Should bring the whole self to work.
I think when you're dealing with that mundane thing that is absolutely, it's like antithetical, it's like soul sucking, it's like dampening all that. You need to take exactly as much to offset that. But if you take much more, people are going to notice. And I fall into the category of I don't particularly want to be noticed for this. I'm not afraid of it. It's just that's not what I want to carry forward at work. So I don't put up sigils in my cube, and I don't wear certain jewelry and all of that. And that's okay. It's okay to have that particular boundary. I think a lot of people, again, when they find their path and they're embracing their thing, I'm going to go and wear all the jewelry. And
Oh
I'm
my
going to
God,
wear
yeah, no, those
all
pagans
the
with like
patchouli.
pentacles
And-
everywhere, pentacles
Right.
on the cats,
Right,
pentacles.
exactly. Yeah. And it's just, the angelic sigils on the computer and all of that. And it's like, you can do that. That's a viable way. If you want to do that, go for it. But then you can't be surprised when people kind of go, what the hell are you doing over there?
Got pagans
I
going
used to
everywhere.
work for a company that was a very family-owned company, and I sigiled the trucks, because I was a transport driver. I wanted people to see me, because I was tired of semis pushing me off the road. Driving people in wheelchairs, bad idea, pushing off the road. And so we got a new driver who came in and detailed the truck, which removed all the sigils. And I was at con, and Friday morning, my boss calls me and says, "What the hell did you do to the trucks?" And I went, "Huh? What did I do with the trucks?" He goes, "We have a truck in the median because it got pushed over by a semi." And I went, "Did somebody wash it?" And he went, "Yeah." I went, "Uh-oh." My boss is a great guy. He walked out to the truck, well, his brother walked out to the truck, and with a crayon, and drew the sigil that I sent him. With the intent of, I'm a bigger truck than I am physically. And it stopped being pushed over into the median. So sometimes when your boss goes, "Hey, are you and you go, "Uh-huh," they'll call you up and say, "Hey, what happened to the truck?" And sometimes when your company gets bought by another company, you go back in the closet. Because when they start off with, "And we pray to Jesus, our Lord and Savior," you go, "Okay, I know nothing."
Yeah, exactly. It's just, self-preservation's a good thing.
I've got a question actually right along those lines, and you've touched on it in a couple different ways. That by doing magic, you're most likely to face plant into stuff. What are some strategies that you've found for dealing with the consequences?
Journals. Journals are huge. Recording what you're doing, and what happened, and then what continues to happen.
Be scientific about it.
It's huge. Yeah, you need data. If you're going to do science, you need data. You don't get to do science and then walk away. That's not science. That's just pissing in the wind.
Well, and I know not everybody likes to write stuff down, but the hard fact about it is memory is very fallible. And, over time, it skews. And one of the things that I found most useful, especially with my earlier stuff, was dating things. It was really hard for me to get into the habit of like writing down time and date and stuff like that. But for a certain period, like with the house in the like 2000, 2001, 2002, like I tried to get everybody to actually like write stuff down. Like there's a couple like worksheet papers and things, and like you could see trends. You could see where like this person's stuff kind of bled over into that person's stuff. So writing things down, taking responsibility, like at least allowing for, like there's a trap you can get into that I've seen on the other side of like just assuming that everything that goes wrong is totally your fault. Like there's this dude that I know in New York who's totally sure he brought down the towers. I'm in like pretty much every natural disaster, and I'm like, journaling at a certain level of objectivity might help with that, and being able to go back and also communicating with other people who also seem to think that they're the ones who did that too, but allowing for equally the possibility of I'm full of shit, and maybe I did it, and trying to like really bring to bear a certain amount of critical analysis with that.
Since I do a lot of medium work, I always take another medium with me. And we never talk about what we're seeing in a new place. We don't discuss anything while we're in there, and we write it down. That way we know that we're not contaminating each other's work just by chatting it out. And that is very helpful in learning and not hitting a wall and not overinflating what you're seeing. Or second guessing yourself and saying, nah, that couldn't have been there. That's too weird. It's too weird. Oh, you saw it too? Okay, fine. Okay, it was there. It's not too weird.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I try to hammer home for anyone who has energy like a counselor is this little mantra for when you're learning how not to faceplant on other people's emotions is to say to yourself, I acknowledge this and it's real. This is not mine. I will deal with this when I am in a safer space and have the time. And that usually can help sever what's happening, especially if you do the, I acknowledge that this is real. Like this is happening. I'm feeling somebody else's baggage. I can't deal with that right now.
I think the discipline of baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
You get into this, you start playing, you go big. Okay, it's no good trying to light a candle with a flamethrower. So maybe you should learn how to use some matches.
Mm-hmm.
My English teachers always used to tell me, you don't get to be Shakespeare by just writing out blank verse all the time. You need to learn some rules. You need to learn the structures, and then you can, or it's like jazz musicians is another good one. You learn your scales, and then you can improvise on those scales. You don't get to pick up a trumpet and blow into it and make the loudest noise you can. Everybody starts with the loudest noise you can because we're toddlers.
Oh no, watching
But there's no excuse not to grow up.
watching new people reminds me of that kid in the Harry Potter movies who is constantly blowing things up
Yeah.
in the first movie, because it's like, okay, didn't work, more oomph,
Right.
more oomph, more crap.
Yeah. And this is not to say, I don't want this to come off as lecturing. It's not, it's just, we've been there, we know, and you've probably all been there in some degree as well, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here.
Well, and there's, of course, everybody knows this stereotype, the person who read one book or like went to one class and then is suddenly, I'm an expert on this, I'm totally going to like do all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy. Mastery does not come in reading one book.
Yeah, a little humility goes a long way. And it's not something that comes naturally once you get into this
Yeah,
business.
tell us the person who wrote that book in many cases. Mastery doesn't even come in being the person who wrote the book. Like there's a certain audacity in being the person who's like, I'm going to put this down and teach other people how to do it. By the way, I'm still learning how most of this works. Like you get, what I have learned is every time I am pretty sure I know how it works, something comes along and makes me have to revise my understanding of it. And that's part of science. And you have to be willing to make those revisions as new information presents itself. You certainly should never be, when doing magic or energy work, there is a state that you have to be in where you believe that what you're doing is going to work in that moment. And you should also cultivate the mindset of, once you've done it, stepping back and assessing, how invested am I in the fact that I just made this work? Like, am I seeing results that are not actually there? Like, you have to have a little detached emotional checklist of yourself. So in the work, you are whole hog on it, and then step back and analyze. And ask yourself, am I being swayed by this? What am I bringing to it? Have I been front-loaded? Am I so invested in the outcome that I'm seeing results everywhere? When my mom passed away, two of my aunts, bless their hearts, and I mean that in full Southern sense, were convinced, like they kept calling me up to get me to affirm to them that the experiences that they were having were like legitimate ghostly encounters. And I swear to God, one of them was, I was thinking of Janie, and the clouds parted, and I saw like one of those rays, and so that was her communicating with me, right? Probably not. I mean, like by my vows within my system, I can't say, if that person sincerely believes that the dog's talking to him, I can present many options of, have you thought about maybe you're seeing things? But I can't say, nope, you're totally wrong. But I'm like, if you want to see it that way, think about how emotionally invested you are in stuff. Like, really do hard assessment.
Yeah, what's happening, and then what's the story you've made up about it?
Yes.
I think it's interesting if you keep up with some of the great quantum physics stuff going on there, like 11 mathematical dimensions, and we don't see any of like you see like 3 or 4 of them maybe. So we never actually perceive reality. Never. None of us see, and none of us see the same reality. What you think is red, I clearly think is a hot pink. So, but the point is that, so we don't see reality, so what do? We have to make up a story about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we make up the story so that we can talk to other people about it. But the story isn't real either, but it's meaningful. That's okay. But it's when you start making up the stories that just suit you,
Yes.
when you
Yeah.
become your own echo chamber, when you believe your story so much, when other things try to intercede, try to tell you that it's different, that's when you start to run off the rails.
A rookie reincarnation mistake that I saw happen so many times that I swore to not be that guy was, the group of friends where they start kind of like seeing patterns, and the one I'm thinking about, like they were sure that they were King Arthur and Guinevere, and like they all fit themselves into the roles because the archetypes fit. And at that stage in their development, kind of plugging into that myth and those archetypes was very helpful to them. But then not having the wherewithal to step back and go, this is a story and this is a myth, and I can work magic within this structure, but I am not literally Lancelot.
Yeah.
And an additional thing with that for a lot of people, starting with reincarnation stuff, is somebody will remember being in the French Revolution. And because there are a few historical markers they can point out, and there's like a couple of really obvious people that they can be like, well, I must have been this person, because 3 things fit, and I want to have a name. And
The whole I want to be special
Yes.
is a powerful driver. I don't think anybody gets into any of this because they want to be normal. Because I would just like to sit back and not affect anything. No. It starts off because you want to be special. And that's okay. We all want to be special. But chances are, on some of those levels, you were probably just a peasant, and that's okay.
what I would find damaging within nascent groups with that is, rather than somebody sitting down, taking the time to do their own inner work, writing it down, recording it, outside of trying to fact check right away. Like they have one dream and they're like, okay, and they just grab a whole bunch of facts and kind of like start plugging it in. Memory is really fallible, and the more you expose yourself to it, the more you're going to try to make your story fit if you really want it to. And then little groups would be, oh God, the worst was like I have crossed oceans of time. I feel a connection to you. Clearly you must be. We have been married 80 billion times on all these multiple things. And,
Slow your roll.
well, and the thing would happen is that the other person was like, yeah, I remember this one
Yep.
thing. And they would feed back and forth into one another until they created this narrative that has, within that conversation, they end up becoming less and less valid with it. And it can go one of two ways. One person ends up buying that bullshit all the way. For like the rest of their lives, they are sure that they were Lancelot. And then somebody, when they find like one thing that disproves it, they get bitter about everything.
Wow, that is like the energetic equivalent of being a fedora-wearing edgelord.
Yeah. Oh, I knew plenty of them. Like there was a lot of that in the 80s, dear God.
Any other thoughts, questions?
I had a bit of a thought. It's kind of coming from things the other side. You know, you baby step along, especially when you're first starting. But I think sometimes we kind of front load people with a, oh, by the way, disaster's about to strike kind of feeling. This whole thing of like, it's okay. You can do magic. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fun. But don't do anything. Anything you do is going to hit you back, and so you better watch out for it. Also, don't work with spirits. They're all evil, and they're all out to get you. And you just get this massive amount of paranoia, and it's like, well, I've loaded that all into their subconscious. Disaster's about to strike. It's going to be great. I don't know. I don't know exactly how to get around that necessarily on when you teach people, because you need to let them know, okay, these are possible risks, but I think it's good to give them a metaphor of it's kind of like real life. It's like, yes, someone may mug you, but if you're not in a dangerous area, it is not very likely to just spontaneously happen. You know.
Our methods are not terribly sophisticated. I'll agree with you there. Yeah, people like to load you up with all the ethical stuff, and ethical stuff is important, but you don't really get it until you've made some mistakes. It's a lot like the parenting thing. You can wrap your kid in a bubble and they can never touch anything and they'll never learn anything. But letting people make mistakes is hard too, especially as your teacher.
Yeah.
Watching your student go off and screw something up, gotta let them do it. Maybe you can be there to help pick them up at the end.
I equate it to like when my parents were teaching me how to ski, and it was, okay, baby steps, yeah, pizza, make a snowplow. And then I got overly confident because I started being really good at the green hill. And then I was like, oh, I'm the best skier ever. I am way out of my depth, oh God. And then having the tools that they taught me, they front-loaded with, this can be dangerous, you can break bones. But they front-loaded the information of, if you get in over your head, these are the things that you do to correct it. And that's something that we do sometimes forget to give people. It's all the doom and gloom, oh my God, and don't do this because you're going to affect the cosmos. But if you do, here's how to backtrack out of it, is the second step that usually doesn't get told right away.
And they never tell you, cosmos is pretty freaking resilient. It's been here before you, it'll be here after you.
So that's sort of a paradox that I kind of deal with in that a lot of things that I try to do are not perceptible to me. I don't get a lot being warriorish, and so I sort of rely on all the sensitive people around me to tell me what's going on. That being said, everybody's visualizations for things and experiences are sometimes vastly different. So do you have any advice for how to filter that into something usable? What do you take with lots and lots of salt, and what do you perceive as being genuine?
What I've found is that your instincts are usually pretty good if you're honest with yourself. If you're getting a bunch of different stuff, if it feels too good to be true, it probably is. I think developing a bullshit detector is really, really good. What you're asking is really hard because you got to make the mistakes to learn to recognize the errors first. But I think you begin to find data points that are similar.
Yes.
Yes.
And I always think about when we're doing the stuff at Gather and we're saying, someone's making an energy ball and they're thinking about water.
And it's
I pass it
rutabaga.
to- And I pass it to someone else. They say rutabaga, okay, either I didn't work or their perception's off. If I pass it to Sarah and she says blue, well, maybe there's something there, maybe not. The only way to know that is you keep repeating. You
And if
keep-
3 or
keep
4
working.
times rutabaga girl
Right.
is still
Right,
completely like the one outlier of all the answers.
yeah.
So for me, one, assume that everyone's opinion is flawed.
Yeah.
And that it is going to be subjective and personal. Ideally, with repeated experiences with that person, you'll start to learn what their language is and also where their blind spots are. Everybody has some things that they're gonna suck at, and they're gonna have some blind spots, and they're gonna have some things that they tend to interpret the wrong way. And if you know what how they tend to skew stuff, even if they're giving you information that sounds kind of wrong, like if you know that that's their consistent wrong direction, you can rule that out. And again, it's the shared data points
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and the repetition.
The blind men describing the elephant,
Yes.
that story.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a rope, no, it's a tree, no, and you need to, it's hard to try to put that together. It can take, depending on what you're doing, it can take a long time.
The easiest way to do it is to be very rooted in your lexicon of how you experience things. So I experience things in waveform and in atomic absorption spectra of elements.
Not a chemist at all. Cool.
And that's where that's how it works for me, is I'll see an energy like an oscilloscope, or I'll see, if I look at someone and say, oh, that looks like the AA spectrum for neon. What does that mean to me? What does that color pattern mean? And then if somebody else says something and I say, hey, what does it, oh, that smells like strawberries. What does that mean for you? In your lexicon, when you smell strawberries given a situation, what does that usually mean in your experience? If it means the same thing as neon means for me, we're probably accurate. We're just not communicating with the same language.
Like with the people that are helping you, if you basically learn how to translate their perception into the universal, functional what's going on. Like Sarah said, she sees something in a certain wavelength. For most other people, that doesn't mean anything, but to her, it means something specific. And so if you, get to know Sarah well enough, you can then translate her perception. If you have 3 different people, you can all translate. You then go for the shared data, the correlation. There you go.
Sometimes you'll encounter someone who is very, very firm and very convincing with their perception of you. And what I strongly recommend, never revise your own interpretation of your experience simply based on one other person's opinion. If somebody comes up and is like, you are absolutely a flesh golem from ancient Greece. Mykonos, I saw those, they were everywhere, and you're exactly like that. They're especially when somebody feels like they're just starting out, and that person seems to be an authority. Hell, even if they are someone who is viewed as an authority. It is opinion, it is subjective, and if it sounds absolutely wrong, don't try to revise your whole thing just to make it fit with that one person, just because they seem like they should be an authority.
And don't use somebody else's, the way they do things as a measuring stick for yourself.
Right. It's good to take, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We have a lot of past life work that we do as a house. And people who don't tend to get the visual imagery, like the big Gone with the Wind, all the extras in the period costumes and the scenery backdrops and everything, if they don't get it that way, they think they're doing it wrong.
Yeah,
And that is not the case. People are going to remember things differently, the same way that you're going to experience energy in this lifetime differently from somebody else. So using an example that someone gave in one class that you went to of hey, this is how I experience this, and then you don't experience it that same way, you're not doing it wrong. You just haven't learned your language yet. So don't give up and think that, oh, well, I suck at this and I can't do it because I don't do it the way that Michelle or Chris do. That's,
Yeah, all I was gonna jump on was, it's like clues, it's like you're solving a mystery. So
Mhm.
if someone comes up to you and does the whole, you're a flesh golem thing, okay, that's very interesting, we'll write that down. and
Yeah,
write that away.
that says a lot more about their belief system than it does about yours.
If someone else comes up to you and says, well, that's very interesting. And that's,
Yeah, and
if you
if
get
5
10
people are
people, right,
like,
it's like,
hey,
well-
you remind me of this thing.
Right, and so, it's all finding patterns.
also, dude, that's gross.
We usually take a break about an hour in. If you need to use the bathroom, you go down there to the right. There's gender one and 2 genders, so use whichever one you feel comfortable with. And if you haven't paid me, come see me. Because I want $5.
And there's